The glass door slammed shut behind me, Daniel's condescending laugh echoing through the frosted panels. "We need faster decision-makers," he had smirked, cutting me from the final review of the Meridian account. 3 months of my life, reduced to nothing. Standing in that sterile hallway, my chest tight and the world tilting off its axis, I felt something shift. The 32nd floor of Zone Technologies felt like a prison that morning, all glass and steel and impossible expectations. The marble floors reflected the fluorescent lights like a frozen lake, and I could see my distorted reflection staring back at me, a woman in a navy blazer who looked smaller than she felt. You know what's funny about moments of professional devastation? Time slows down. I could hear the muffled conversation continuing behind that glass door, probably Daniel already rewriting history, explaining to the team how my methodical approach had been holding back the project timeline. I could hear keyboards clicking in nearby offices, phones ringing, the elevator chiming as people went about their normal Tuesday while my career imploded in slow motion. But let me tell you something about being underestimated. It's like being handed a loaded weapon while your opponent assumes it's empty. The hallway stretched before me like a gauntlet. Karen from HR passed by with her perpetual clipboard, offering one of those pitying smiles that corporate employees perfect for moments like these. "Rough meeting," she whispered conspiratorially, as if speaking louder might somehow make my professional humiliation more official. I managed a tight nod, not trusting my voice to remain steady. Behind Karen, I could see other colleagues pretending not to notice the drama unfolding, their eyes flickering toward me with that mixture of curiosity and relief that comes from watching someone else's career crisis unfold instead of your own. What Daniel didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been documenting everything. Every dismissive comment, every stolen idea, every moment my contributions were minimized. My grandmother used to say, "Mija, when someone shows you who they are repeatedly, prepare accordingly." I had been preparing for 6 months. But the preparation went deeper than just documentation. See, I had learned something important about corporate politics during my time at Sterling and Associates. Power isn't just about who's in the room when decisions are made. Power is about who controls the information that makes those decisions possible. And for the past 6 months, I had been the sole architect of the most comprehensive client analysis in Zone Technologies history. Walking back toward my cubicle, I passed the executive conference room where senior management held their weekly strategy sessions. Through the glass walls, I could see the mahogany table polished to mirror perfection, the leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly salary, the wall-mounted screens displaying market data and client portfolios. That room had always felt like a foreign country to me, a place where people who looked like me were welcome only as support staff, bringing coffee or technical reports to the real decision-makers. But something had shifted in my perspective during that walk of shame. Maybe it was anger, maybe it was clarity, but I suddenly understood that the people in that room needed my expertise far more than I needed their approval. The cubicle farm stretched before me in beige monotony, dozens of fabric-covered workstations arranged in perfect rows like a corporate cemetery. My space was in the 3rd row, positioned strategically near the printer so I could be interrupted whenever someone needed technical support or regulatory clarification. The irony wasn't lost on me that the person they considered too slow for executive decisions was the same person they came running to whenever they needed answers to complex questions. As I settled into my ergonomic chair, the one luxury Zone Technologies provided for employees who weren't quite important enough for offices but too valuable to completely ignore, I noticed the small framed photo on my desk. Me and my grandmother at my college graduation, her weathered hands clutching my diploma like it was made of gold instead of expensive paper. "Mija," she had whispered that day in Spanish, tears streaming down her cheeks, "education is the only thing they can never take from you." She was wrong, I realized. They couldn't take my education, but they could take my opportunities. They could take my voice. They could take my seat at the table and give it to someone whose only qualification was knowing the right people. 9 months earlier, Margaret Torres had handpicked me to lead preliminary research for Zone Technologies' largest client acquisition, the Meridian Group, a $2 billion multinational consulting firm seeking a new tech partner after their previous vendor's catastrophic failure cost them millions in downtime and compromised client data. The selection process for this project had been intense. Margaret had interviewed 12 analysts from across the company, looking for someone with the perfect combination of technical expertise and industry knowledge. When she called me into her corner office that October morning, I remember feeling like I was being summoned to the principal's office. "Olivia," she had said, gesturing to the leather chair across from her impressive desk, I need someone who understands that this isn't just about winning a contract. This is about proving that zone technologies can compete with the industry giants. Someone who gets it that one mistake could cost us not just Meridian, but our reputation in the entire financial services sector. Her office was intimidating in the way that successful executive spaces always are, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, awards and recognition plaques covering one wall, a bookshelf filled with industry publications and leadership texts. But what struck me most was the photograph on her desk, Margaret shaking hands with the Secretary of the Treasury at some high-level economic summit. This wasn't just any client. Meridian operated in 17 countries with compliance requirements that would make government contractors nervous. Their client roster included 3 central banks, dozens of investment firms, and several sovereign wealth funds. A data breach or compliance violation wouldn't just cost money, it could trigger international investigations. I knew this because I had worked in their industry at Sterling and Associates, specializing in fintech compliance. But more importantly, I understood the cultural nuances that most tech consultants missed. Financial services weren't just about moving money, they were about trust, reputation, and the kind of risk management that kept regulatory bodies from shutting down entire operations. I need someone who can think 3 moves ahead, Margaret had continued, her sharp eyes studying my reaction. Someone who understands that in this industry, being right 6 months late is the same as being wrong. I spoke their language, but more than that, I understood their fears. For 3 months, I built what I privately called the Bible, 247 pages of meticulous research mapping their organizational structure, analyzing their current tech stack, and documenting every regulatory requirement that would impact our proposed solutions. But this wasn't just data collection, it was strategic intelligence gathering at the highest level. I had conducted over 40 interviews with industry experts, regulatory consultants, and former Meridian employees who had moved to other firms. I had analyzed 3 years of compliance reports, studied the aftermath of their previous vendor's failure, and built detailed profiles of every decision-maker in their organization. The research went beyond technical requirements. I had mapped their corporate culture, identified internal political dynamics, and even analyzed the educational backgrounds and career trajectories of their executive team. When Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, their CTO, mentioned in a trade publication interview that she was particularly concerned about vendors who promise the world without understanding the regulatory landscape, I made sure our proposal directly addressed that concern. But Daniel Carver, the newly appointed project lead with board connections through his father-in-law, had different ideas about who deserved credit for success. And here's where the story gets interesting, Daniel wasn't just incompetent. He was strategically incompetent in the way that only truly privileged people can afford to be. See, Daniel had attended the same elite business school as 3 Zone Technologies board members. His wedding had been featured in the social pages of the Financial District's most exclusive magazine. He played golf at the country club where our CEO was a member, and his wife sat on the charity boards with the wives of half our senior management. Daniel didn't need to be good at his job because his network would always catch him when he fell. The problem was, he needed my research to make it look like he was succeeding. The theft started small, a phrase here, an insight there. I'd present findings in weekly meetings, and by the next day, Daniel would discuss them with senior management as his discoveries. When I tried to speak up, I was told I was being territorial about collaborative work. But the pattern became impossible to ignore. In team meetings, Daniel would interrupt my presentations with comments like, "That's exactly what I was thinking," or "You're building on the framework I outlined last week." He had this way of nodding thoughtfully during my explanations, as if he were processing information he already knew rather than hearing it for the first time. The most infuriating part was watching colleagues who had known me for years start giving Daniel credit for insights that were clearly mine. Sarah would reference Daniel's analysis of the European compliance requirements in emails, even though she had been in the meeting where I had presented that exact research. Marcus would joke about Daniel's encyclopedic knowledge of banking regulations, apparently forgetting that I was the one with the fintech background. It was like watching my professional identity disappear in real time, replaced by Daniel's carefully constructed image of competence. The breaking point came during a video conference with Meridian's assessment team. 15 minutes before the call, Daniel pulled me aside in the hallway outside the main conference room. The space felt smaller with him in it, his expensive cologne mixing with the sterile air conditioning to create an atmosphere that was somehow both intimate and threatening. Olivia, I've been thinking about the presentation flow, he said, his tone deceptively casual, like he was discussing weekend plans rather than dismantling 3 months of my career-building work. I think it might be more effective if I handle the strategic overview. Let you focus on the technical details in the background. Technical details in the background. After 3 months of leading this project, I was being relegated to technical support for my own research. I felt my carefully maintained professional composure begin to crack. Daniel, I prepared the entire presentation. I know this material better than. I'm sure you do, he interrupted smoothly, but client management is really about relationship building, and I think my background gives me an edge there. You understand. The call was a masterclass in professional humiliation. Daniel presented my research as his insights, stumbling through explanations he didn't understand. But Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, Meridian CTO, wasn't fooled. When she asked about GDPR Article 25 requirements, Daniel went blank. Instead of saving him, I spoke directly to Dr. Hayes. I'd be happy to address that, but perhaps we should schedule a separate technical deep dive for proper compliance discussion. Her expression shifted, re-evaluating our team dynamics. Very insightful, Ms. Fernandez. Let's definitely schedule that. After the call, Daniel was furious. That's when we had our final strategy meeting, where everything fell apart. You can't just redirect conversations with clients, he said, positioning himself between me and the door. It makes us look disorganized. Something snapped. Daniel, I redirected because you were about to give incorrect regulatory information that could have cost us the contract. His face flushed. I think you're overestimating your importance, Olivia. We need team members who make quick decisions and move fast. All this analysis paralysis isn't helping anyone. Going forward, focus on background research while the core team handles client interactions. The killing blow, we need faster decision makers. Walking back to my desk felt like a funeral march. The open office layout, collaborative workspace design, suddenly felt like a fishbowl where everyone watched my humiliation unfold. Here's what really stung, I wasn't just another employee fighting for recognition. I was the daughter of immigrants who sacrificed everything for my opportunities. My father worked 2 jobs, my mother cleaned offices at night so I could afford unpaid internships. Every successful project existed because preparation and thoroughness were survival skills, not preferences. The supporting characters had chosen sides, and their choices revealed everything about corporate culture at Zone Technologies. Sarah Kim, my closest colleague and the person I had mentored through her first major client project, offered sympathetic glances but stayed carefully silent during meetings. She had her own career to protect, her own projects to consider. In hushed conversations by the coffee machine, she would shake her head and mutter about how unfair the situation was, but when Daniel entered the room, she became invisible, another piece of office furniture that could observe but never intervene. I feel so bad about what's happening, she whispered to me one morning while we waited for the elevator. But you know how it is. I can't afford to get on Daniel's bad side, especially with my performance review coming up. The elevator arrived, and Daniel stepped out, nodding at both of us with that practiced executive smile. Sarah's entire demeanor changed instantly, shoulders straightening, professional mask sliding into place, any trace of our conversation erased from her expression. Marcus Rodriguez from accounting had taken a different approach entirely. Rather than offering false sympathy, he had embraced the new power structure with enthusiastic opportunism. He started making jokes about analysis paralysis whenever I passed his desk, clearly parroting Daniel's talking points but delivering them with the kind of knowing smirk that suggested he understood exactly what he was doing. Hey Olivia, he called out one morning, loud enough for half the office to hear, still analyzing that analysis of your analysis? The laughter that followed felt like acid in my veins, not because the joke was particularly cruel, but because of how quickly my colleagues joined in, eager to align themselves with what they perceived as the winning side. Even my direct manager, Carol Webb, seemed to defer to Daniel's aggressive timeline despite knowing my track record and the quality of my work. In our one-on-one meeting the week before everything exploded, she offered vague reassurances about challenging team dynamics and learning opportunities. Daniel has the board's confidence, she said, not meeting my eyes while she shuffled through papers on her desk. Sometimes we have to adapt to different leadership styles, even when they don't align perfectly with our natural work preferences. Translation, you're expendable, he's not. That evening, I did something I had never done before, I called my mentor, Dr. Patricia Williams, the woman who had guided me through the treacherous early years of my career at Sterling and Associates. Patricia was now a senior executive at Hartwell Consulting, one of Meridian's biggest competitors, and someone whose opinion carried weight throughout the industry. Olivia. Her warm voice filled my small studio apartment, making me realize how desperately I missed having an advocate in my corner. How's the big Meridian project going? I've been hearing interesting rumors about Zone Technologies making a major play in our space. 3 days later, I was deep in research when I heard commotion. Daniel burst through the glass doors, face crimson, hair disheveled. The entire floor could hear him before he reached my cubicle. Why did the client walk out? He demanded, voice carrying across the silent office. Every conversation stopped. 30 pairs of eyes watched us. I looked up calmly. I'm sorry, which client? Meridian. They walked out 15 minutes in. Said our proposal showed fundamental misunderstanding of their requirements. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on anyone. Daniel and his faster decision-makers had violated 3 regulatory requirements I'd flagged as deal-breakers. They proposed data storage that didn't meet GDPR requirements, integration protocols violating SOX standards, and security frameworks contradicting Basel III banking regulations governing Meridian's operations. They'd also promised 6-month implementation when regulatory requirements alone needed 18 months of testing. Dr. Hayes had asked one question exposing the house of cards: how do you plan to address cross-border data governance while maintaining audit compliance? Daniel's response: we'll handle the compliance stuff in the second phase. $2 billion lost because Daniel thought regulations were compliance stuff. I stood slowly, feeling the office watching. This was my turning point. Daniel, I said clearly, the information you need is in my research folder from 3 months ago. Section on regulatory compliance we discussed. Page 47, if you'd like to reference it. The silence was deafening. That's when the elevator chimed, and Margaret Torres emerged. Margaret was a legend, the woman who built our international division and never needed to raise her voice to command rooms. Her eyes took in the bizarre scene with analytical precision. Daniel, my office. Now. She turned to me. Olivia, I'd like to speak with you separately. 30 minutes later, Margaret had received a detailed email from Dr. Hayes questioning why our team seemed unaware of basic requirements any competent consulting firm should have addressed. She specifically requested the analyst who'd demonstrated understanding during the preliminary call. Dr. Hayes wants to speak with you about salvaging this relationship, Margaret said. I've reviewed the project files, particularly interested in a 247-page research document apparently not consulted for yesterday's presentation. 2 hours later, I was presenting my complete analysis to Meridian's executive team via video conference. But Dr. Hayes had a proposition. Your analysis is exactly what we hoped to see. However, given yesterday's issues, we have concerns about internal communication. Meridian wants to work directly with you as primary contact for all strategic decisions. The resolution came swiftly, but not in the way anyone had expected when Daniel had burst through those office doors 6 hours earlier. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, Daniel had been reassigned to what Margaret diplomatically called internal process improvement projects, corporate speak for professional purgatory where careers go to die slowly and quietly. His nameplate was removed from the project directory before the end of business day. His access to client files was revoked. His corner office, with its view of the city skyline and its expensive ergonomic furniture, was reassigned to someone who actually understood the difference between strategy and buzzwords. But my vindication was just beginning, and it would unfold in ways that exceeded every fantasy of professional revenge I had ever entertained during those dark months of watching Daniel steal credit for my work. Margaret called me into her office the next morning, and this time the atmosphere was completely different. The harsh afternoon shadows were gone, replaced by the warm golden light of morning streaming through those floor-to-ceiling windows. There were fresh flowers on her desk, white orchids that someone had clearly arranged with care, and the papers scattered across her workspace were project proposals rather than crisis management documents. Olivia, she said, sliding a thick leather folder across her desk with the kind of ceremonial gravity that suggested something significant was about to change, I'm offering you a promotion to senior project director, with your own team and full authority over client relationships in the fintech compliance sector. Your starting salary will reflect the value you've brought to this company, value that, frankly, we almost lost because of what I can only describe as catastrophic leadership failure. I opened the folder with trembling fingers, and the number on the salary offer made me blink twice to make sure I was reading it correctly. It was 30% higher than what I had been making, with performance bonuses tied directly to client retention and expansion that could potentially double my compensation within 2 years. But the real validation came in the days and weeks that followed, as the industry grapevine began buzzing with news of what had happened at Zone Technologies. Word travels fast in the financial services world, especially when it involves a $2 billion client publicly rejecting a major consulting firm's proposal and then specifically requesting to work with a previously unknown analyst. 3 weeks later, I was working late in my new office. Yes, I had an office now, with windows and a door that actually closed and a view that stretched across the downtown district to the harbor beyond, when I received an email that made me laugh out loud for the first time in months. It was from Daniel's father-in-law, the board member who had been instrumental in his rapid promotion through the ranks of Zone Technologies. The email was brief and professional, but every word was carefully chosen to distance the sender from the professional catastrophe that had befallen his son-in-law. 8 months after the incident, Daniel appeared in my doorway, looking older, more subdued. His confident posture replaced by something resembling humility. "I know you don't owe me anything," he began quietly. "I want to apologize. Not corporate apology, real apology for what I actually did." For the first time, his facade completely crumbled. "I stole your work. I dismissed your expertise because I was threatened. I almost cost this company millions because I was too arrogant to admit I needed your knowledge." He'd been working with a career coach, examining everyone he'd hurt. My name topped the list. I knew I was out of my depth from day one but decided to fake it instead of asking for help. My father-in-law got me promoted, and I was so afraid of exposure that I became a fraud. He was leaving Zone Technologies, moving to work for his wife's family business. No shortcuts, just honest work. But first, he handed me a 3-page letter of recommendation detailing my contributions and his mismanagement, plus formal HR documentation clearing my record. Taking credit for others' work isn't just stealing success, it's stealing their story. Everyone deserves their story told truthfully. He also mentioned Meridian was expanding their consulting services, seeking external partners with deep compliance expertise. Someone who understood technology and regulatory intersection at the highest level. After he left, I called Dr. Hayes. The conversation exceeded all hopes, a joint venture combining their industry connections with my team's knowledge, offering comprehensive compliance consulting across 3 continents. 1 year later, I'm writing from our new headquarters housing both divisions. My team has grown to 23 people, advised on over 200 implementations, and saved clients $50 million in potential fines. But my proudest measure of success is cultural. Every new hire hears about thorough research, asking difficult questions, never letting anyone convince them expertise matters less than speed. In my division, no one succeeds by diminishing others. Last month, a young analyst contacted me about handling a manager taking credit for her work. I invited her to coffee, shared my story, and 3 months later she joined a partner company where her contributions are properly attributed. The question I get most at speaking engagements: how do you handle people undermining your authority? My answer: be so undeniably excellent that their theft becomes obvious. Build relationships on real value, not politics. Sometimes have patience to let consequences unfold naturally. Substance always wins over style. Competence outlasts connections. People building careers on others' work eventually run out of willing victims. Daniel found contentment in work matching his actual skills. His apology didn't erase what happened but completed the story, allowing both of us to move forward. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge, it's building something so successful that those who tried to diminish you become footnotes in a story always meant to be yours. Tonight, watching my team through conference room glass walls, working late on a Singapore proposal, debating regulations, and building thorough analysis, they don't fight for respect because we built a culture where excellence is expected, not exceptional. Where are you in your story? Fighting to be heard? Building culture for others? Transforming obstacles into opportunities? Your story matters. Your work matters. Sometimes the best decision is slowing down long enough to get it right. Trust me. I'm speaking from experience.